Welcome back, everybody, and we're on the last stretch for today. I have left my binder open to page 4-6. I don't know if there's anything else on that page. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for letting me ask not so much a question, but I did pose one to Kathy just during break. Regarding the Police Services Board, it is a pretty substantial increase over last year of $300,000. My question to staff was, am I correct in still remembering that's less than we were paying under the old formula 2 years ago? Yes. Okay.
The
so
answer is yes.
It's a bad news, good news kind of budget line, I guess.
Councillor Black.
We're on the police services, are we? Anyway, a question on that is there's a clawback formula. So every year, do we not get a higher reduction? No, but it wasn't not spread out over a number of years where we
the phase-in is complete.
This is the last year? Oh, okay.
Okay.
So now it's just sort of this is the new base.
Councillor Wells.
We're still in 4.6, am I correct?
That's where I am.
And since I dealt with the library board and was concerned about a 4.3% increase, I guess it would be only fair if I look ahead and see that the Long Point Conservation Authority is asking for an 8% increase. And I think we have several representatives from the Long Point Conservation Authority here. Could we ask why they are requesting an 8% increase, please?
I believe Councillor Columbus gave us a breakdown on 3 items, but go ahead, Councillor Columbus.
Yeah, some of the other reasons is the parks that are leased out as campgrounds. There's a issue with hydro services and water services that have to be upgraded. We did half of them last year, and we're looking at expending dollars towards the rest of them for this year. That's part of it. Perhaps Councillor Height can help me now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, and to all the council. We've worked very hard on this board, and for the last 2 years we have taken no drawdown on reserves. So now you're seeing more of an actual number as far as the increases required to run the business. I know the year before it was a hefty increase, and those investments were made to the capital. Okay, so that was increasing the value of the assets, which has in turn increased the revenue streams considerably. I think next year you'll see that number come more in line with the Grand River one, but mind you, they have the monster budget, so 2% is a ton of money for them. 7.9 isn't very much for us, and you know those revenue investments or those investments in capital we've made to take care of the revenue are really going to show in the long run. We will actually be able to put money back into the reserves. So we're working on it. It's a slow process, though.
Again, Mr. Chair, the reason that I ask that is it's pretty hard when we are responsible for the library board and we complain about 4% and we say to the Long Point, which if I remember correctly, and again, not being disrespectful, and I don't mean it that way, Mr. Mayor, but I think Long Point Conservation Authority, I think for last year also got quite an increase in their levy. So, you know, I like to try to be fair. People think that sometimes I'm not, but I like to try to be fair, Mr. Mayor. And honestly, 8% is more than I think is fair. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Chair, I'm going to suggest that we reduce that. And now, do we have a right to recommend that we reduce this or not?
I think we have to send it back to them.
Same as we did with the library board?
Yes.
No, we can't do that. Now, Councillor Oliver, you were there, so please, I bow to your expertise.
Well, members realize that my history is old history at this point, but my sense, Councillor, is that we had our kick at it when their draft budget came to us at the beginning of January. We chose not to force a change then, so I don't think legally we can force a change now.
I honor Councillor Oliver, and I will keep quiet.
Are you ready to move on?
Yes.
Let's go to council and the mayor. Tab.
That's me. Through Mr. Mayor, I just would indicate that the summary for Mayor and Council's is on page 4-9. The net levy requirement is up 12,700 or 1.8%. I might just point out, though, that this budget does fully implement the new council remuneration system in 2017. And the other changes are really the net changes in some grants. There was a $50,000 item for 2017 and 2018 for the Port Dover Community Health Center. It was intended to be funded from the contingency reserve, so there's no net levy impact. That has been taken out of the budget, but obviously the funds remain in the contingency reserve. The other reduction in grants relates to $35,000 grant was paid in 2016 to the Norfolk Historical Society for the Everbrook Donnelly Museum. That's been removed for 2017, so there's a $35,000 reduction. And the grant for SCORE region has been reduced from $35,000 to $25,000 in this budget. So those are the main budget changes, and unless there's anything else, I'll leave it at that, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, again, to be consistent, and much has been said about the fact about the council increase as far as wages is concerned, but when you look at the overall budget, you'll see that we are below the 2% increase for the overall mayor and budget, so I don't think that we are being unreasonable in our request for taxpayers to support us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Height. Yeah, yeah. Good question. You've been getting some overtime in, Councillor Height? We don't, pardon?
Yeah, I think there's some, through Mr. Mayor, I think there's some year-end accounting that perhaps didn't get done. We may have an inaccuracy.
Again, get your microphone. Sorry, Keith.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that there may be some accounting outstanding there and an adjustment that should have been made, but do we know what is that the case? Okay. So the projected actual is actually inaccurate, and I apologize for that.
Get that looked at. Okay. Good question. Councillor Brunn and then Oliver.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. What is there a policy for seminars and training for council and the mayor? How does that work? I see there's like $24,000 past budget, and we spent 21. How does it work, if I might ask?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just report actually that most of that is actually comprised of the memberships for AMO, which is Association of Municipalities of Ontario, which is a significant item, I believe in the order of 10 or 12. Okay. Then there's also Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, and the actual budget for council conferences, training and development is in the order of $7 grand. Yes. Yeah. So you will see there that, and the bulk of the memberships is the AMO membership. Okay?
No self-defense training for councillors in there. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought this might be my only chance to mention to council. I know there was some concern around this table previously with respect to SCORE and the possibility that Middlesex County may have chosen to exercise its notice of withdrawal, which you recall they threatened to do in 2016 and decided against it. They threatened to do again in 2017. I can report to council that all four of our county partners, hopefully including Norfolk, but Middlesex County has reaffirmed its support for SCORE for both 2017 and 2018. And as far as we know, Bayham Township, Bayham Municipality as a subset of Elgin will also continue to be in. Elgin County has continued to decline to come back into the team, but we'll continue to work on them, and obviously we're glad that at least Bayham sees the merits and has continued to stay in. So I think there are good things in the works for SCORE. If I could, Mr. Mayor, just again, while I've got the podium, so to speak, there is this new partnership that was hinted at when the delegation came to us, working with a company called Canada 168, I believe, which is a Chinese company which is seeking to partner potential Chinese investors with possible opportunities in southwestern Ontario, and they have chosen the SCORE region as an area of particular interest to them. And I think it's because of our major involvement, at least in this county, in the agricultural trade business with ginseng and with tobacco and other commodities in China. So that's got lots of potential. There's actually going to be a delegation going from SCORE, paid for by offshore interest of our chair, Stephen Molnar, I believe, going in March or April, and possible future opportunities like that as well. So that's one thing that's quite exciting. The other thing, this year we are going to be meeting in a few weeks with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change regarding this proposal that you've heard us talking about for the SCORE region around water and food security, and seeking special funding to undertake a pilot project. Thank you.
Councillor Black?
I'd like to know how serious this council is about SCORE, so I'm going to put a motion on the floor to eliminate the $25,000.
The $25,000 membership for 2017. Okay, discussion on, oh, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it is important to note, though, there is, I believe, a one-year notice requirement. So I'm not sure
You're right.
that the 25,000 reduction is in order. I think the best you could do is give notice of that for 2018. I think that's perhaps as far as you could go.
No. Okay. Any suggested reductions or other comments on Mayor and Council? If not, I'll move on. County Manager's Office is next. I'm on page 4-12. Mr. Robichaud.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The proposed net levy requirement is up $6,200 or 1.6%. The, I guess, major budget driver is salaries and benefits, which would be up 1.9%, and with some other juggling adjustments in the budget, the net levy requirement is actually not much more than that. So unless there are questions about the departmental summary, I think that's all I would bring to your attention at this point. I'll answer any questions.
Are there any questions on 4-12? Councillor Wells.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, this is the, if I remember, the county manager's budget and his staff. And I'd just like to thank the county manager for leaving and think of the money that we have saved now. Thank you very much, Keith. And good luck to you, and thanks for the service that you have rendered to Norfolk County.
Anything else on this page? Councillor Black.
Luke, I see Keith has itemized a series of challenges, emerging trends, services, issues on 411, Annalise Carr Aquatic Center. I wondered if, Keith, if you could expand on that. What's the challenge? To maintain it, or to do what? To have a new one, or?
Actually, I guess it really, through you, Mr. Mayor, it really speaks to, I know through 2016 we had significant issues with air quality and There are a number of interim makeshift matters. I know certainly while the burden of that largely fell on Marlene Watson and folks at Public Works and folks at Community Services, certainly I was involved at various points when we were meeting with folks from the Ministry of Labor. I certainly was front and center as a responsible municipal official who might be subject to some action by the ministry. I think certainly things are well in hand, but I kept it on here as something that the county manager's office should keep looking after, because we still have works to complete there to finally and completely resolve the matter, and those things were discussed during the budget process, and I think they're certainly well on the way, but didn't feel it warranted kind of taking it off the county manager's watch list, so to speak, because there are, certainly issues that could crop up before we reach the finish line on the improvements that could bring us back into, let's say, discussions with the Ministry of Labor. So that's largely why I left it there, Councillor Black.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question to the county manager is in that same section on page 4-11, but relates to the Bonnie Heath pit. And at a recent meeting of our Police Services Board, and I don't think you were able to be there at that one, Mr. Mayor, but a question was posed of the police staff regarding the environmental cleanup and the status thereof. And obviously Keith has been our key person relative to that whole issue, as well as the shutdown of the pit. So my question is, do we have anything new with respect to the ministry or the province's progress on beginning a cleanup? And if not, could we ask the county manager before you leave to do a follow-up and maybe rattle their chains once more?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Oliver raises a great point. Absolutely, Duncan McClellan is the key contact person at the OPP, and certainly he's going full steam ahead on updating the Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental assessments with a view that they will commence the cleanup operations there sometime this spring, summer, with a view to having all of that remediation of the shooting ranges completed in 2017. And in essence, it's my understanding that the plan they file with the Ministry of Environment should be a little more straightforward, because it is not remediation to clean up to continue to operate as a shooting range. It no longer will be a shooting range, so it's really more final remediation, and in that sense it should be a much more straightforward plan. At least that's what I believe last conversation I had with him, that's what they're anticipating. I have, the OPP have always maintained that they will be good environmental stewards of this site. They've always committed to cleaning it up, and certainly I think full evidence that they've already decommissioned and removed a number of the facilities. The only trailer that remains there is the one green trailer, and that's really just for use during the further cleanup and decommissioning process. So absolutely, I'll circle back, but I have no reason to believe that they won't complete those that updating of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 EAs and move to complete their plan with the Ministry of Environment and implement the cleanup.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak further. Is there anything to Mr. Robichaud again in writing, i.e. status reports from them, that you could pass on to perhaps the mayor, or in the interim, I guess, between your departure and when the new county manager arrives on scene, who will have to bring him or herself up to speed on this file, that we as members of the board could in a sense kind of monitor over the next few months, that you could give us an update that we could have in our back pocket if we need it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually I meant to mention, and I overlooked this, and I'm glad you asked the supplementary question. With the great help of Candy and Shelley, Lydia Harrison, our property management coordinator, attended the last meeting on site with me. Lydia has made arrangements for all the signs about no shooting. She's very on top of the file. She has the contact with Duncan McClellan, and Shelley, I think it would be safe to say that she will be conducting the follow-up, and anything that council needs to know will come through Shelley and Candy to council. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay, shall we move on? Let's move on and go to Employee Business Services. There's nothing else there. I see you, Candy, and I certainly see your crew there, and Brent's with us, and Steph and Trev, and what's her name, Shelley. Perhaps you could introduce Carly to the crew here, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce Carly Saint-Amand, who is the temporary Senior Administrative Assistant in the Employee and Business Services Department. She is replacing Jill Binkley on a temporary basis, as Jill acts as your Deputy Clerk for a period of time. And certainly Carly has been instrumental in assisting the department in developing the budget. So we're happy to have her here today. And actually, she was quite excited to be able to spend the afternoon with members of council. So,
well, I hope she's excited when we're finished with her. We shall see. I'm on page 413, and certainly, Candy, any comments before we get into questions?
Yes,
is most appropriate.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few just opening comments. Overall, the Employee and Business Services budget, as presented, shows a modest net levy impact of 2.3%, with total expenditures increasing by 0.3%. The Employee and Business Services Administration budget provides for a 5.5% net levy decrease from the 2016 approved budget. Main budget drivers include a $20,000 decrease in interdepartmental charges recovered and a $1,500 increase in interdepartmental charges paid. There are two factors in the Clerks and Council Services budget which have resulted in an 11.1% overall increase. The main budget drivers in that budget are an increase in salaries and benefits, as well as increased interdepartmental charges of $14,800, which are attributed to rental costs for the Gilbertson Administration Building, which results from the move of record storage from the Langton Administration Building. The Corporate Support Services budget provides for a 5.7 net levy decrease from the 2016 approved budget. The transfer to capital shows a net decrease of $158,000 as a number of 2016 projects were funded through the levy, compared to in 2017 when we only have $47,000 attributed to the levy. Insurance premiums show an increase of $51,500 and are offset by insurance deductibles of $93,500 for an overall decrease of $42,000. Additionally, procurement card recoveries are increasing by $17,600 due to higher volume use. A 41.3% or $121,800 net levy increase is proposed for the Information Systems Services Division budget. This budget includes an $11,000 fee for AODA website compliance software. Additionally, the budget includes $37,600 for principal and interest, which is attributed to the proposed fiber build to Port Rowan. And as we discussed earlier this morning, interdepartmental recoveries are reduced by $60,100 due to the Norfolk County Library's NBI request for a technician and social media library assistant. This amount, however, is offset by an increase in recoveries for the IS division in the amount of $29,500. The 2017 Human Resources and Staff Development budget provides for a 51.3% net levy decrease from the 2016 approved budget. A main driver is the addition of $1,500 under materials and supplies for the annual Summer Student Appreciation Barbecue, and this initiative began in 2016. And interdepartmental charges are also increasing by $4,700. The Employee and Business Services managers would be pleased to address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I certainly have seen three hands, but I want to say that, are there any questions, first of all, on these, I call them summary pages, 413, 414, 415, questions to those three pages, then we'll move into the individual sections. Okay, so Brunton, to those three pages, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I'm on page 414, and I'll try and go through some of these quickly, Candy, if I may.
Yes, certainly.
So I'm clear here. Utilities, like we budgeted It's down. Can you explain that again? It's up 352. Sorry, it was 352,000. Now it's down. That's a transfer somewhere. Is that under utilities? 352,000 budgeted in 2016, and now we're minus 8,500. Is that? Can you explain that to me again?
Yes, that was originally for telephone interdepartmental charges.
For 352,000?
Yes, that's correct. It also includes IT communication in the amount of $332,000.
That's for his department?
That includes cell phone charges, bell line charges in the amount of $185,000.
Well, maybe we better bring that up on the screen here and get a little better look at it, if you don't mind. I don't understand. Like, I realize it's all disappeared in 2017. So where is it gone? Where's the new? Like, obviously we didn't cut 352,000. Where is it been moved?
There is some reallocation, so perhaps my friends in finance could assist us in responding to that question.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, no, a good question. Basically no budget this year, but we were budgeted, or we actually spent 353 last year. Yeah. So it's obviously been budgeted somewhere else, but I don't know where. Either that or we said we spent it and we didn't.
Maybe I could go on, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Under professional consulting services, Candy, I'm going to say there's proposed 311,800. What charges are in there? And I'm going back over to legal here, where we budgeted 423,000. Would that be in contracted services or in professional services?
That's in professional services.
It is?
Yes.
Well, it's short then, because the figure I got from Kathy here, legal services for this year were proposed at 423,700.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that would be the corporate figure as opposed to the amount that's budgeted exclusively in the Employee and Business Services Department.
Okay, so it's under professional consulting services.
Under professional and consulting services, we actually have an increase of 23,000.
Yes.
But corporate support services, which is Shelley's area, has an increase in legal services. We also have an increase for the registering of documents on property titles and lease agreements. We have an increase in the POA area of 25,000 for prosecution due to increased number of court days. We have an increase in POA for quality assurance monitoring, and also an increase in human resources as a result of actuals for labor relations type legal matters.
All right. Before I go back, do you have the answers to that utilities issue, John?
Mr. Ford, the utilities budget?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we're going to have to get an answer for that, because right off the top of my head, right off the top of our collective heads, we don't have an answer.
Okay.
So, well, that's okay. We'll get one.
We will get something and either send a note around to council or provide it to you tomorrow, or worst case Friday. Okay,
if I can go down to contracted services, 445,700. Can we look on that on the screen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could, while you're looking that up, the contracted services and employee and business services for this year, there is a request of a $30,300 increase. And that's in part an increase in the clerk's area of $2,300 for records retention audit, and that's as a requirement of the health unit audit, and that's per legislation and required every 8 years. There's also an increase of $11,000 in the IS, or Information System Services area, $11,000 for an AODA website compliance software.
Well, can we just, sorry, Candy, I don't want to interrupt, but
Okay.
can we just see it on the screen here for a minute? It's $445,000, and if we can just see the breakdown is really what I want to see on the screen. That's it right there, John? Can you hold it?
Yeah, what you're seeing, Mr. Mayor, is the first group here. These are all the contracted services. And then there's a bunch of other things that fall into that same group, which total up to the 445. But the contracted services by and of themselves is this group here, which is 137,900.
Under the provincial offenses, and I guess, Candy, can you answer? Like, there's operating costs and there's revenues, net cost of provincial offenses. What is that? Is that it right there? Am I looking at proposed budget 2.6 million?
Unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, we can't actually see the screen that council is looking at.
Oh. Can you answer that, John? Like, how is that like, if we, I'm looking at where your little arrow is right now, Provincial Offenses Act Administration, and go across. I'm sorry, it says 26, like what? 2,600, but what, like provincial offenses, I assume we spend about $1 million in there, and we recover.
Mr. Mayor, let me just answer this question that Councillor Brunton has this way. What you're looking at right here, and what you're looking at on page 414, is the summary for the department. If you want to see what the Provincial Offences Act costs are in total, it's on another schedule. It's on page, I don't know what page it's on. But what you're seeing here is the contracted services for everything that happens within the department, not just for POA. POA is on, it's part of corporate services that's on page
423.
423, thank you. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing all of the contracted services for the whole department. You probably want to drill down into an individual division.
All right. If I could maybe ask some other questions. Human Resources Administration, 29,000. What would that be? That's obviously not salaries and wages. Huh? Contracting is only.
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, was there a question, Councillor Brunton?
Well, yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One, I want to know what the contracted services are for $445,000, and I guess I'm looking for the breakdown.
Okay, let me start, Mr. Mayor, let me start this over again. Where am I here now? If we go back to contracted services in general.
All right.
Okay. You'll see that contracted services, this line that I've got highlighted here is 445,000.
Correct.
Okay, if I expand that, the first part, and unfortunately we've got the same name, which is a little confusing. These are contracts under the contracted services. Then you've got a whole bunch more of them down here, postage, courier, freight, blah, 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 blah. That's what makes up the 445. So the first part, this group right here, these are service contracts that we have. They total 137,000 of the 445.
Okay.
Okay. And the one in particular that I expanded just before I got to here was you asked for human resources admin, and here are the contracts that are budgeted for human resources admin.
So you're budgeting 30,000 for special projects? As a result of HR?
That's for, Candy, that's contracts, consulting, and/or other temporary casual staff required to complete special projects as a result of the HR and SD, FTEs reduction, blah, 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 blah.
So is that 30,000 a maybe?
Is 30,000 a what?
A maybe? It's not specific as to, it's like, it looks to me like a maybe. It might happen. We might need it. Is that, am I wrong?
If I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, no, in fact, there's some history to that budget line. Originally, it was 50,000, and over the past few years, it has been decreased. Initially, that amount of money was approved by Council when there was a restructuring and from the Human Resources and Staff Development Department to the creation of the Employee and Business Services Department. And what happened during that reorganization was I had been the general manager of Employee and Business Services, so 100% of my time was put to the HR function. As well, the senior administrative assistant of HR, with 100% of her time was put to HR. But when we went through the reorg, some of my time and a large amount of my time and a large amount of the time of the senior administrative assistant obviously is split over the other divisions, no longer exclusively HR. So in 2013, I believe, Council approved $50,000 that could be used for contracted services when we needed individuals to come in and assist with HR work. For instance, on an annual basis, we have to deal with pay equity maintenance for the Service Employees International Union, which represents the service workers at Norview Lodge. So we have an individual come in to assist with that because there's currently not the expertise within the Human Resources Department. So yes, that money has been spent. In fact, the $25,000 was spent in 2016, and we anticipate that there will continue to be a need, and that's why we've increased it by $5,000 for 2017.
Okay, and we agreed we're going to get some answers on those utilities, John? Wherever that money went?
That's that 400 or 300,000 odd dollars for telephone.
352,000 spent in 16.
This number right here. IT communication for 332,000. Is that the number you were?
Yes.
Kathy said she has. While we've been discussing it, while Council's been discussing other things, she's looked that up.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Brunton. In the past, we've treated telephone as an interdepartmental charge, so all the costs were charged for the telephone, for cell phones, to the IS department. We were in the process of changing our accounting, and we were actually moving the actual cost for phones to the individual departments. So right now we have the budgets in all the individual departments for 2016 and 17's budget, but the actuals were, because they've been charged actually to the IT department right now, they're showing up right in the IT department as opposed to all the individual departments. So you probably see some telephone budgets in the operating departments that you'll see no dollars amount spent because they're sitting here in this department.
Okay.
To be reallocated at a later date for the year end.
Okay, I get you. My next one, Mayor Luke, if I may, is the seminars and training. You're asking for $123,400 for seminars and training. And if I may, and I know I hate to dwell on this, but I understand you're going to get a report, County Manager, and I guess my question, none of these seminars and training, they're not out of province, are they, or out of country?
Through Mr. Mayor, there's very few. I know there's one particular public works one that we send 1 or 2 people to a year that's very large, and it's in the United States, I believe, but The only other one I can remember in all the years is we did have a staff member with a particular initiative in heritage and culture that was invited to attend an international conference. Their conference registration and accommodations, I believe, there was a significant amount of costs covered, and I think the out-of-pocket for the county might have been $1,200, which wouldn't have been much different than if the conference had been in Toronto. So I think that's about the only case I can remember in any recent history. And so the most part, actually most conferences and training seminars are here in Ontario, and many are in the southwestern Ontario region.
Well, I guess if I may, I'm not. What I look at here, I certainly want to see staff get trained and go to the appropriate things, but I just wonder if we're doing too much, and it's an area we can zero in on in terms of where they're going. And I went one day last year to Ontario Good Roads. Yeah, one day I went down on the Monday, and I think it was like $300 and something for one day, and to me it was ridiculous. I hate to say that for the price, but anyways, and I'm sure staff are going to different locations and so forth, but I think if we could look at some of that, again, I'm not trying to say staff can't go anywhere. I just would like to know what kind of areas we're attending.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just would point out, though, I think again, the division managers, the GMs, and myself all take it very seriously. Staff have to complete a request to attend form. They give a detailed budget to us for each conference or training seminar. They identify either the mandatory requirements for some certification or keeping it. They identify the benefits to the county. Again, there is appropriate sign-off. Some things have to go to the level of the GM. Some have to come all the way to the level of my office for sign-off. And so there is very tight control and scrutiny over that area, I believe.
What are we looking at here, John? What is that?
Could I please?
What, I don't understand your question. We're looking at?
I wonder what's on the screen here. Is that, what's the last, it doesn't.
This is, okay, I'll close this up.
Okay, no, that's fine, that's fine.
This is seminars, this is the training component of that.
Okay.
By division and by work group.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, could I just have a few comments?
Wow.
Carla, sorry, Carla, if you could bring it back to the previous screen. Actually, the $123,000 is actually comprised of training and development as well as memberships. So I believe that the training and development itself for 2017, the requests are down slightly, down $2,000 to $104,000. But what I would like to point out is that first of all, a little over $14,000 of that $104,000 is actually corporate staff training to train staff in the consolidated health and wellness strategy. And Council will remember that approximately a year and a half ago, there was some monies that we received back from Green Shield from our unrestricted deposit account, and Council approved $100,000 of those monies going towards training for staff. So that is included in that amount that's being charged to the EBS area. As well, we have a number of new staff in the Employee and Business Services Department. And unfortunately, when you have that, you have individuals that may come to the job that don't necessarily have the experience and the training that perhaps a more seasoned personnel might have. A very good example of that is the new purchasing area that we have in the corporate support services area. We have 5 new employees that are new to the purchasing area, and with that comes significant amount of training as well as certification. And what we're increasingly finding is with positions such as those in the procurement area, for positions such as those in the HR area, for instance, it's not a matter of staff going to a 1 or 2 day conference. What it actually is individuals that are required to keep up their professional designation that they have to be recertified. And what you'll find is a lot of those costs are actually part of that recertification obligation.
Thank you. Can we go down, John, one more there, memberships and associations? Wow. Thank you. That's it for me.
That's it for you? Have some more speakers? Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Would you be able to scroll up, Mr. Treasurer, please? Scroll up, please. Keep going. Keep going. A little more. Okay. Okay. So, in this department, 3 out of the 5 divisions have gone over budget. If you look on the previous page, 4-13, okay, if you look at the forecasted actuals compared to the approved budgets, like I said, 3 of the 5 went over. I'm not even sure about the IT because it's got a forecasted actual of minus 69,000, but say that actually went under budget. One of my concerns is that those 3 departments that went over budget are estimating to be under budget, but clearly that hasn't been the case this year. And as we've drilled down and I've watched as Councillor Brunton has gone through things, I see things that clearly are controllable expenses. Account 4181, meeting expenses, has a budget of $9,300, $16,000 was spent. Computer supplies, again, a budget of $14,000, $20,000 was spent. Office supplies, budget of $43,000. $66,000 was spent. Retirement gifts has a budget of $7,000. I'm not sure, maybe we need a limiting credit card so it doesn't get up to $12.5 thousand. Like, how does one control a department that appears to be uncontrollable? If we set budgets and they randomly go over, even with little things like postage stamps, well, what are we doing?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, a couple of the comments that Councillor Height made. For instance, retirement gifts. Council has endorsed a retirement policy whereby retirees receive $20 per year of service. So the EBS department, although we do our best to make assumptions about the number of individuals that are going to retire in the subsequent year, we have no way of actually knowing. So that's an uncontrollable cost for the Employee and Business Services. We're simply applying the policy that's been approved by Council based on the number of retirees. In terms of meeting expenses, some of the meeting expenses, for instance, may be in the human resources area. Again, quite often those expenses are beyond the control, unfortunately, of the staff. In certain circumstances, for instance, you may have arbitrations. You may have conciliations, you may have mediations, even in some cases negotiation meetings. And certainly we try to be as cost conscious and efficient and effective as we can. Whenever we're in the bargaining process, we attempt to encourage the unions to negotiate on our premises. There are some